one of the things we want to do as we remember Easter together and we celebrate everything that it means for us is pay close attention to Jesus and how he deals with this incredibly testing time that he goes through. Not because our experience is equivalent to his, obviously what he does on the cross is unique, but nevertheless we can see Jesus under pressure and we can see what he turns to in those moments and obviously learn lessons from that. And one of the things that's striking about Jesus's kind of final 24 hours is he turns to prayer, and he makes that a massive priority for him. So the story of Gethsemane, which we're going to be remembering tomorrow on Maundy Thursday, I'll just read you a little bit from Mark chapter 14. It says, "They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I pray.' He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. 'My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death,' he said." That's a huge thing for Jesus to say in that moment. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And so we can picture Jesus, and elsewhere in the Gospels we're told that he was in such agony that he was literally sweating blood. And of all the things he could do in this moment of sort of pressure and stress, he turns to prayer. He turns to his Father, and he comes to him with what he needs. And what's fascinating is the disciples, in contrast, they all fall asleep, and it's almost comical. 3 times in Mark's Gospel, he comes back and's like, "You guys can't even stay awake. Come on, just keep watch with me. This is my hour of need." They all fall asleep. And if you were to just be a casual observer and you were to see the 4 of them there, Jesus kind of sweating and stressing in his agony, and then the others sort of just fast asleep, we might think, wow, Jesus, you need to chill out a little bit. Take a lesson from the book of the other 3. They're just taking this in their stride and they're resting well. And yet when the actual moment of testing comes, it's Jesus who stands the test and perseveres through it and endures it. And it's the other 3 disciples who fall away and fall apart. And just even in that, there's a little lesson, isn't there, about what prayer, the power, not that prayer in itself does, but by turning to our Father in our hour of need can do, what that can do, what he can do through us and in us. And Paul writes something similar. So Paul in Philippians, this is a verse that we're going to come back to, I think, many times over the next month or so. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, Paul writes these words about, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." And the burden of that, there's lots in those couple of verses, but the burden of it is present your requests to God. In everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And bear in mind that Paul himself was under house arrest when he wrote these words. He was waiting to see if he was going to get executed. Eventually he was executed. He never escaped from that particular prison. And yet what Paul writes, again, kind of obviously different from Jesus, but in a situation where he himself was facing his own death, is, hey guys, we've got to be praying here. We've got to turn to God in prayer. And so for us, in the middle of our crisis that we're experiencing, where we've had hundreds and hundreds of people die every day in our country, let alone what's happening around the world, this surely is a time for us to pray. And I know we already are praying, but it's something that I've been coming back to afresh. And it's hard to pray when you're under a lot of pressure sometimes. If you're working from home, which almost all of us will be, and if you're not, you're probably absolutely flat out. If you are, you're probably pretty flat out as well. And the stress that we're under as well means emotionally we sometimes will struggle with that. And so there's just a couple of lessons to learn, things that can help us, that have helped me. One is find time. Jesus makes it, of all the things he could do, he makes it a priority to make space for him to go and pray. And for me, I'm trying to practice this. I do better some days than others, but I've just discovered with the stage of life I'm at, with 4 little kids that get up very early and then are on the go from the moment they wake up, and then at night time I'm dead. I find that if I don't get up even earlier than they do, I don't get much time. So I just try and drag myself out of bed a lot earlier than I want to be, just to have a few minutes with Jesus, just to present my requests to him. And here's the second thing, to be honest. You know, when Jesus goes to pray, he's just really real. Like, he's in agony, his soul is overwhelmed to the point of death. He's not pretending, he's got it all together. Prayer is his place for falling apart. And we can think that prayer is meant to be this place where we have to pretend that we believe everything and that we're totally confident about the future. And actually, it's a place for just being honest with the Lord and just saying, I'm really scared and this is what's going on, and you know, can this cup pass from me, and all of that stuff. And here's the third thing. It's just from what Paul says in Philippians. He just has this little 2 words: in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your requests. And so in all the things that we are battling with and having to juggle with every single day, we can bring them to him. Pray for protection, we can pray for healing, we can pray for the people that we love, we can pray for our mental well-being, we can pray for the mental health of our friends and our neighbours, we can pray for our street, we can pray that God would turn this for good, we can pray that he would stop it, we can pray for our Prime Minister, who yesterday we heard was in intensive care, we can pray for the churches that we're a part of and God's church in this country, like in everything. You know, we can pray really simply that there would be what we need in the bank at the end of the month. We can, whatever it is, in everything, Paul says, present your requests to God. And the final thing I'll say with this is, often with prayer, I feel underconfident because I feel like I'm no expert when it comes to prayer. And I'm not sure anyone ever does feel like an expert, but I remember coming across a little quote a little while ago that helped me, and it just said, the best way to learn to pray is just by doing it. And so however you do it, you know, Pete Greig talks about, when you pray, keep it real, keep it simple, and keep it up. And for us, in the midst of this crisis, let's not forget today to turn to him in prayer.